Everyone knows that ACL injuries afflict girls basketball players, but I'm constantly confused or amazed or bewildered when I listen to coaches or read articles or comments on message forums written by coaches who completely dismiss any possible way to reduce the likelihood of an injury with girls basketball players. So there are coaches who I know personally who are actively against girls basketball players lifting weights, and or they simply complain that they don't have enough time to lift weights. They don't have enough time to do something like a dynamic warm-up, or maybe they complain that they don't know how to teach proper movement skills. And then they complain when their players tear their ACL or are injured. Maybe they throw up their hands, they blame fate, or they simply blame, the anatomy of female players. But they're not actively willing or able to do anything to reduce the injuries. And then you look at some other people who are writing things and saying things, and they refuse to take a stand on reducing the number of games that players are playing, or advocate for players actually having an off season. So they know that a player who tore her ACL was playing 12 months a year at 12, 13, 14 years old, and they don't say anything except when she tears her ACL when she's 14, and they go, this is terrible that this happened. Why would this happen? But they won't do anything about it. They won't change how they coach. They won't change how they train players, and they won't change the schedule with which they're operating their teams. And so they're not making any efforts in any way to attempt to change the outcome. They're simply throwing up their hands and saying, this is terrible, and then getting sympathy from other people. Yeah, that's terrible. Your best player tore ACL. Tough luck for you. But they didn't do anything to try to prevent that from happening. Now, whether or not there was anything that could have been done, that remains to be said. There's certainly evidence that suggests that certain neuromuscular training programs, have a statistically significant effect on reducing non-contact ACL injuries. There certainly is some research to suggest that if you're stronger, you're going to reduce non-contact ACL injuries. So it's possible that this player has a really bad anatomy, or maybe it's a hormonal issue, or there's other factors that we can't always account for and we can't always explain. So there is a potential that regardless of what was done, this injury still would have happened. But there also is the likelihood or the possibility that a better training program, more rest, which may or may not be the coach's fault, because sometimes a coach will attempt to have the player play less, but the player will then go to an individual trainer or then play on a second AAU team or whatever the case may be, because they're worried about having a weekend off or having a week off or 2 weeks off or something like that. And there's this mentality that if I'm not playing, I'm not getting better, so I need to go play somewhere else. So there's that possibility that a coach said, hey, we're going to take 2 weeks off, and that player went and worked out with an individual trainer for those 2 weeks, and so there was no rest, no recovery, and still no real off season. So again, it's not always a coach's fault. It's just frustrating when I continue to see the same people having players that suffer injuries, and I know that there isn't any change in the way that they're training players or the behaviors that they have towards their players. They still practice as long, they still don't lift weights, they still don't do any kind of neuromuscular training program or dynamic warm-up to really teach or train proper movement skills. And then they, get sympathy from other people when their best player tears their ACL, and they just, kind of look to the heavens and ask, why me, why me, why me? Rather than actually proactively trying to do something to introduce some movement training, making sure players, have the ability to decelerate, have the ability to land from a jump. Once they can do that, raise the intensity. So can they handle forces if they're doing a depth jump, let's say, off a higher box? So if I can do a depth jump and land in a good position off a 12-inch box, can I do the same off an 18-inch box? Can I do it off a 24-inch box? Off the 12-inch box, can I not just have a static landing, but can I land and jump, a true depth jump, without any kind of knee collapse or knee valgus? If I can do it at 12 inches, can I do it at 18 inches? Can I do it at 24 inches? Is my height of my jump? So that's one kind of measurement for, how well you're performing off a depth jump is, can you return your jump, your vertical jump, as high as the box that you stepped off of? So if you're stepping off a 12-inch box, can you return and jump at least 12 inches? 18, can you jump 18 inches? So these are things. Can I squat properly? Can I decelerate properly? Do I know how to do a proper hockey stop? Do I know how to do a proper stride stop? Can I change directions at speed? Can I change directions in a chaotic environment where there's a defensive player in front of me and I'm trying to change directions in an unanticipated movement? These are all movements that tend to be associated with injuries. Furthermore, can I land from a jump without using my visual system? So most jump training programs and a lot of ACL rehab type programs or injury prevention type programs, they have players jumping over things on the ground like cones, and so players' eyes are fixed on the cones. Well, in a game, the most likely or the biggest source of injuries, I guess, is on a rebound, and especially with a player within 1 meter and with the eyes up looking for the ball. So if my eyes are up looking at the ball, I can't use my visual system to anticipate the landing. So I have to have other mechanisms, proprioceptors and a feed-forward motor control, so that I can anticipate that landing and prepare and stiffen so that I can absorb, the force and dissipate it and sit into a good landing position without injuring myself, and to prevent that kind of collapse and the knee valgus. So once I'm able to do it, using whatever, using my visual system stuff, can I progress, and can I then do it without staring at the ground as I land from a jump? Can I do it with my eyes up, or can I do it when I'm reaching for something, or can I do it when I'm catching something? So these are all progressions that we can add, and there may not be time to add every single one in every single training session, but over a period of time, if you're working with this player, whether you're an individual trainer or whether you're a team coach, can you add and progress this player so as they're able to produce more and more force, they're getting stronger, they're jumping higher, they're also able to decelerate that force and control that landing, and hopefully remain injury-free or reduce the likelihood of injury. But as long as we just say, oh, well, that we play basketball and then we just, cross our fingers and hope for the best, well, then you can't be surprised when players injure themselves, because we know that girls have a, high incident rate of ACL non-contact injuries in basketball. It happens. And to a certain extent, there's probably nothing we can do, and we're probably never going to get to the point where we eliminate all non-contact ACL injuries. But there are measures that we can take, and there are statistically significant measures that we can take in terms of training proper movement and incorporating some neuromuscular training programs, which is a fancy way of essentially saying movement education and plyometrics, into a dynamic warm-up, into a pre-weightlifting session, into an off-day workouts, so that we can try to prevent some of these injuries, so we don't have to hold our hands up to the heavens and ask why so frequently.